I want to show you how to build a simple to-do app. It's not very original because there's like millions of to-do apps, but that's not important. The functionality of the app is actually not important. The important is the pattern that we're going to follow. We will try to completely test drive it, and I'll show you what. It will be a little bit repetitive, but repetition is like it's like learning Latin almost. You have to repeat all those conjugation to really sink in your blood, so it becomes really natural. So let's start with the problem. Like, what's the problem of current day JavaScript development? jQuery is pretty much everywhere, right? It's not really a problem. The problem is that we use jQuery to manipulate the DOM at a very low level. So if you look at a lot of apps, they are inserting some LIs in the DOM, they are updating tables. It's very low level, so you have to keep track of the DOM. You have to keep track of which elements you inserted, which elements you removed, and it's very daunting, and your business logic code is actually buried in all that jQuery code that manipulates the DOM. There's also a lot of copy and paste, because once you figure out how to manipulate DOM, it is like 50 lines of code, well, the safest way is to just copy and paste it. And you have these duplication all over your code base, and it makes your development really difficult, and refactorings are almost impossible. There's also lack of structure, and there's two layers of lack of structure. The first one is, if you move from one JavaScript application to another, they never share the same folder structure. Everything is different places. There's no really good split between controllers and views. If you switch an application, if you move on to a new project, you really have to understand first how the project is structured, and then you can actually contribute. And another lack of structure is in the fact that we don't have really development workflow. If one application uses in-browser testing, another one is probably running it from command line. So there is no development workflow that you can use to test and develop your application. That's, of course, there's maintenance nightmares, and because we are using a lot of DOM manipulation in jQuery, writing tests, it's almost impossible outside the browser. You always have to run your tests in browser because you need the DOM to manipulate it and insert it. So let's start with the tool set. A couple of years ago, the only tools that we had when we were as JavaScript developers was browser and text editor. That's pretty much all we had. But today, there's, especially after Node.js, introduction of Node.js, there's a lot of tools that we can actually utilize and make our JavaScript experience as good, almost as good as Ruby on Rails experience. So we have, Node, we have npm. There's actually as many packages for npm as for Rails and Gem. So pretty much all the libraries that were written for Ruby are written now in JavaScript for npm. There's also Grunt. Grunt you can use, it's a build tool. You can use it to test your code. You can actually also use it to build your application and compile your resources, such as CoffeeScript or Sass. There's Bower to manage your dependencies. And there are tools like Yeoman and Lineman, which actually structure the development workflow. And I'm going to show you today how to use those tools. And if you are working on Ember apps, there's also a browser extension that you can use. This is an example from Chrome. So it's very helpful because you can actually introspect the structure of your Ember application. So if you are working on Ember apps, you should definitely get this plugin. Okay, so for this project, actually, I used Yeoman. And it's a really composite of three tools. Yeoman for generation of the folder structure and the code, Grunt for running all the tasks, and Bower for managing the dependencies. Installation is very easy. You just install Node, then you install Yeoman, and then Ember generator. And if you want to create a new Ember application from scratch, all you have to do is pretty much create a folder, run the Ember generator, and then you can start generating controllers and models, etc. For test driving your apps, there's a lot of testing frameworks written in JavaScript. Most of the time, I use Jasmine. It's a Pivotal project, and most of the Pivotal projects actually use Jasmine. But I always like to try different things. So Mocha and Chai is also a very good framework, and I use it for this project. It's a BDD testing framework for your JavaScript code when you write these kind of BDD test suites where you describe the feature and you describe its behavior, and then you assert that behavior. So here is an example of asserting an expectation using chai. So you basically expect that true is true, or obviously you have to replace it with your business logic. These are the chai matchers that are available. So it actually supports should and expect syntax as well as the old school assert. And let me show you a quick demo of the app that we will be building today. As I said, there's nothing really exciting. It's just to-do app. So you just run it by running grunt server, and will actually compile all your sources, and it will actually run it for you. Open the browser, and also as you are working on your code-based JavaScript code, as you save your files, it will actually automatically refresh the browser. So you don't have to leave your text editor to actually see results of your code. It will also refresh all the test runs, which I will show you in a second. So it's a very simple app. You can filter around. You can create new tasks. You can see that task there. You can actually filter. There you go. Nothing really exciting. So this is the list of features. This is pretty much what we will get at the beginning of the project, right? You will get the list of features of the application that you're about to build. So we have features like display list of tasks. We should be able to add a new task. We should be also able to mark a task as done. This is just the mockup. So this is HTML mockup without any JavaScript code and with the outlines of all the features. And most of the time, you need some kind of tracker tool for your story. So here's Pivotal Tracker. Here's actually Gherkin description of the story that we are working on. And this is the setup of actual project. So before you can start working with Ember and Yeoman, you have to install Ruby for Compass and Sass for your CSS. You have to install Node.js, Bower, Yeoman, Ember Generator, and Karma. And we're using Karma to run the tests. And then if you want to follow along, you can just check out this code, then just install dependencies, Bower dependencies, and Node.js dependencies. And this is you just run grunt server. I just showed you a minute ago, and you will see the app, working app. Okay. You can also run the test from the command line. That's thanks to Karma. So I'll show you here. You just run grunt test, and we'll actually run all the tests. And we'll also watch your test for any changes. So you don't have to leave your text editor. You just save your tests, and you save your app code, and we'll actually rerun all the tests, and it will show you which tests are failing. Okay. Folder structure. Let me just really quickly show you the folder structure. So in my editor, this code was actually generated by the Ember generator, Yeoman generator. So we have all the app code is in app folder, all the tests are in test folder. Here we have all the configuration for our tools, Bower, Grunt, and etc. Our app has all the scripts, controllers, models, and routes on the scripts folder, and all the handlebar templates are actually under templates folder. And our integration tests are here in the integration index.js. All right. Okay, so we have, that was the setup for the app. Now let's start working on a feature. Okay, so we're going to implement this list of tasks. You can check it out from GitHub this way. You just check out the tag. And we always start with a user story. This is pretty much what a project manager, PM, or a client would give you. It's a textual description of the feature that we are implementing, right? It's very simple here. We want to display a list of tasks, right? So our role is to actually convert this English description into our executable code using Mocha suite. So here we define that the feature task list should display a list of tasks, and we assert that list of tasks by looking at the number of tasks in the table, and it should have 3 tasks. So as we say, when we save this file, our test will rerun automatically, and you will see this failure that it actually expected 3, but it only got 0 rows, and it's failing the test. So our role here, as our goal here as a test-driven developer is, well, we either have to make the test green or change the message. And what I mean by change the message, change this message, change the way it fails. So this is, obviously it doesn't work because it doesn't display anything. So we have to do outside-in development of the feature. So we're going to start with the UI, right? In Ember, we have to display a list of something. So we're going to use hash each. And then inside each row of the table, we're going to actually display the name of the task. So this will display the list of tasks. But for this to work, we have to define a model. And for the model to be injected in our template, well, we have to actually define it on a route. So we're going to define to the route where we actually define the model attribute, and we're going to get all the to-dos from our store. Our data store, for it to work, we need a model, right? So we also have to define the model, and we define the model by defining to-do, which extends from the DS model, and it has two properties, name and property. And because here we are concentrating only with the UI, we're going to use fixtures. We're not going to use any server. So we have a fixture which is fixed list of three tasks. And now when we save all those files, our tests rerun and they are passing. And if you open the browser, you can actually see that it displays the list of tasks. So now we went through the whole process of test-driven development of a simple list, right? So first we got a scenario. We got a first user story, and then we converted it into executable code as a scenario. And then we added a list of tasks using each, and then we added the route and model. And there was no low-level DOM manipulation here, right? We didn't have to use jQuery or anything. Pretty much Ember abstracted away everything from us. We added functionality pretty much without touching the DOM. We also have, thanks to the toolset that Yeoman provides, we have a code watcher that recompiles all our assets as we save our code, and we also rerun all the tests are rerun as you save them. So you don't have to go to the shell and just rerun all your tests. Everything is happening automatically. So combination of Ember and Yeoman or Lineman gives you really good development setup, and it saves you a lot of time when you have to spend on your app like 8 hours a day or more. Okay, next feature. So the next feature is actually adding a task, right? So we have to start, yet again, we have to start with a definition of the user story. And this user story is a little bit more complete because it has two scenarios. The first one is adding a valid task, and the other one is adding invalid task. So we have a happy and unhappy path. And what's important about user stories and your integration test is that you shouldn't actually test a lot of detail of your code. You should only test your happy and unhappy path, because most of the edge cases of your code base should be tested in unit tests. So that's why you only have here two scenarios, happy and unhappy path. And this is and we're going to translate it into a executable code. Before we can actually translate it, we need a setup for our tests. So the first thing, this is the recommended way of doing integration tests in Ember, which is you have to reset your application by calling reset on it. We visit the home page, and then we fill in the task name with the new task, and we also basically click on a button. So this is actually the translation of the scenario in the user story, so we make sure that when we add a new task, the number of tasks goes up by one, and the actual input text box where we enter the task name is empty, and we also do not display any error messages. And this is the unhappy path. So when we add a task with no name, it should actually do not add any tasks to the list, and it should also display the message. So when we run the test, when you look at the test, it's actually failing, right? It's failing because it cannot find the test name. What's important about test-driven development is that you don't really have to think that hard when you are doing it, because all you have to do is just look at your test and look why it's failing. Like, the test is actually telling you the very next thing that you have to do. You don't have to over-engineer your code. You don't have to think about controllers and models when you're TDDing, because the test will tell you the very next thing that you should do. That's pretty much 80% of the time. So in this case, it tells you, this test pretty much says that it cannot find the task name. And the way to find the task name is, well, we have to add an input text box to actually provide a task name. So we use for that Ember input tag, which allows you to bind a HTML element in this text input with a value, which will be stored in new value, and when you press enter, it will actually execute this create to action. That's another important thing. When you code in Ember, you don't have to think about which controller is it going to be. You have to only think about the ideal situation, which is, well, I have to call some code on the back end, and it probably should call it create to do, and that's all you have to do. You don't have to think about which controller it's going to be. And the same with the button, right? So we wired up the button is just plain HTML, and we just throw in the action to call create to do. And now this is our UI is complete. And if you look at our tests, it's still failing, but it's failing for a different reason, right? Now it's failing not because it cannot find the text box, but because it cannot find the create to do function to call. So we successfully changed the message. And for that, we need a controller. So now we have to start thinking about the controller, right? Which controller it's going to be. So we create to-do's controller, and in actions, we create actually to-do function, which will get the value, because the text box is actually bound to this value. You can access it using the getter. You can get that value, and you can actually create the record in the store by setting its value here, its name here, and then we reset the bound value of the text box to an empty string, and we save the to-do. And now if we save that code, our test is passing. So we went through the whole thing, red-green refactor process. And now if you test the application, you can ask a new task. So all tests are green. So yet again, I think you can see this repetitive process of starting with a user story, converting into executable test, and then adding the markup first, working with the UI outside in, then going a little bit lower into the controller or route layer, and at the very end working with the model. Marking a task as done. It's the same process. We have to add the buttons. So we start with user story. When we click the button, the task should go away. This is the scenario, and this is pretty much, we click the button and we make sure that number of items is 2 instead of 3. We start with a failing test. It's complaining that it's seeing 3 items instead of 2. We implement the button yet again. We bind it to remove to function, and the UI is complete. But our test is still failing because there's no backend implementation of the remote to-do function. And here we actually going a little bit deeper. If you follow along the to-do example on the Ember.js website, it's pretty much exactly the same trick that they use. For each item, you have a separate controller, and each of those controllers for each to-do item actually implements this remove to function, which actually gets the model, the current row, task row. It deletes that record, and it actually persists in the database, the deletion in the database. And now if you look at your shell window with Karma test, you will see that it's passing. And you can test the app. All tests are green, the same pattern. I think you can see here how easy it is to actually follow TDD with Ember and Yeoman. Okay. Adding priority, the same thing. It's getting a little bit repetitive, so I'm going to scroll through it a little bit faster. You write scenario, you have a failing test, you add the drop-down, you add another priority field when you display it in the browser. You have the UI complete, but the backend is not yet ready. You have to make sure that you update your implementation to make it pass, and your test is passing. Priority filter. This is a little bit more advanced. So here we actually have filters, and we're using routes to actually filter the tasks by, if you select high, only high priority tasks are shown. And you start again. When you select the high priority filter, then only tasks with higher priority should be shown. And this is the scenario. We click the link, and we accept only one task to be shown. So here we are using link to tag, Ember tag, which actually links us not to URLs but to routes. These are routes in the Ember routes that you define in your router. So here you can see that we have resource to-dos, and inside that resource we have high, medium, and low. And you can see here that that corresponds to this high, medium, and low. And we have to actually define those routes in our code. So this is just an example for the high route. So this high route gets called when you navigate into to a /high URL. And then we just take advantage of inheritance. So we inherit from this generic priority route, and we call this filter by priority here. So low route would pretty much have a low here. So you would basically reuse the controller, to-dos controller, and we also reuse the same template, which is to-dos index, because for all those routes the display is exactly the same, and all the tests are passing. Okay, so quick summary. So I think you can see that we implemented all these features, and not even once we had to use jQuery. Not even once we had to actually go and grab an element by class name or an ID. Ember actually abstracted away all that stuff from us. All the DOM manipulation is abstracted from us. And when you really think about it, to implement this functionality in plain jQuery or even Backbone, it would be a lot of JavaScript code, because you would have to watch the changes, all the changes to the collections, and if you delete an item, you would have to remove it from DOM, and if the collection has been updated by a different part of your code base, you would actually have to refresh it. Nothing of that is necessary when you're working with Ember. I think also I showed you that outside NTDD with Ember is really simple. Every time we pretty much started with an integration test, and then we started with the UI, the thing that user sees, and then only then we dove into controllers and our models. It's very important to differentiate this way of thinking from, I would say, traditional way of thinking, where when you are implementing a feature, you first start thinking about, okay, which JavaScript classes I need for it, which controllers. That's a wrong way of thinking, because usually what will happen is you will either go wrong direction or you will over-engineer your code, and also you will not test drive it, so it's not going to be tested. When you're going outside in from the UI and from what the user actually needs to see, you usually end up with the code that does just enough to fulfill the requirements of this story. So it's rare to over-engineer your code or veer from the right track. You can also follow really easily red-green refactor cycle. And with Yeoman or Lineman, what you can do, you can actually structure your development process. So what you can do, you can have very well-defined folder structure for all your apps. You also have well-defined structure of how do you run your tests, how do you minimize your resources, how you deploy your resources. And all that, it's abstracted away from you by either Yeoman or Lineman. This is exact copy of a Angular.js talk that I did a couple of months ago, and I pretty much implemented the same app with the same functionality. So if you are interested, check it out on GitHub, and you will be able. If you follow me on Twitter, I'll share all the links. Okay, if you are interested, I didn't have enough time to go a little bit deeper, and I know that I probably missed a lot of information, detailed information that would help you better understand how Ember works and how the test-driven development works. But you should definitely watch. If you have never used Ember, just watch this video, which actually doesn't do any testing, but actually shows you how to implement apps in Ember. And they're actually going through the to-do app example as well. So you will be able to fill in the gap that I missed in this talk. As always, Pivotal is hiring. We are pretty much everywhere. So if you're looking for a job, give us a shout. And follow me on Twitter. And do you have any questions? Thanks a lot.